Alright, peace and greetings, YouTubers. So, the Jemele Hill situation, I'll say this. I find it very funny that people like to selectively pick and choose when they want to be First Amendment disciples. And you know, these are the people who are so pro-First Amendment. You know, there can be somebody who they really like that's a public figure, and that public figure can say something that's super offensive and pisses everybody off, and they will stand behind that public figure, and they go hard for them. You know, it's like, oh, that's their First Amendment right. The First Amendment protects them to say that. Their freedom of speech is protected. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly. The Bill of Rights gives us that. The forefathers did, and da-da-da-da-da, and the fight for our freedom, and America this, and blah, 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 and you guys are snowflakes, and we can't even have our identity anymore because we always gotta be so politically correct, blah, 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 blah. I mean, they go so hard. Then on the flip side, somebody who they don't like says something that they don't agree with, and they're mute. They forget that the First Amendment exists. Or they go the other extreme and they are on the front lines leading the charge for the petition to get that person fired. They want that person blacklisted. They want the, you know, they're leading the backlash, all of the crazy things like that. And so that's pretty much what's happened with this Jemele Hill situation. You know, it's kind of like there's some people who are just very consistent at being inconsistent. And a lot of you First Amendment disciples are very consistent at being inconsistent. So when you look at the backstory, long story short, she works for well, hell, she might not work for them by the time I upload this video, seeing that the way things are going. She might not be working there no more. But she works at ESPN, and she made a series of tweets about the president. She basically said, you know, she believes he's a bigot, he's a white supremacist, he's not fit to be president, a few things like that. And people were outraged. They wanted her gone. You know, there's all kind of backlash. ESPN had to make a statement and apologize and say, you know, her views don't reflect our organization, everything like that. Even the White House has chimed in. You know, Sarah Huckabee Sanders is like, you know, that's a fireable offense and everything like that. And I'm just sitting here looking like, I'm trying to figure out exactly what it was that she said that was so outrageous that now the White House has to jump in and make some statements. Okay? Because there's been a whole bunch of bigots that have actually said a whole bunch of horrible things as of the last year, and the White House hasn't condemned any of those statements. But all of a sudden, somebody's calling out white supremacy, and now that's racist. Because that's the society we're living in now. It's now racist to call out racism. It's now racist to call out white supremacy. It's now a problem to call out the actual things that are disenfranchising groups of people. And so it's about to lead me to my point, and then I'm going to go to bed because this is not going to be a long video. And so pretty much, the way that people have responded to this situation proved that three things exist: white supremacy, structural oppression and racism, and white privilege. And I'm going to tell you how. Alright, first let's tackle white supremacy. A lot of people don't think, and by the way, a lot of people don't think any of those three things exist, and it's really hard to have a conversation about those three things if they don't exist. So those of you who have already turned your blind eye to it, whatever, just turn the video off so you don't get any more pissed off than you're going to be. But anyway, so white supremacy. White supremacy is a structural hierarchy system that keeps white people at the top of the chain and everybody else is beneath them. Alright? It's more than just economics. It doesn't just mean that white people are rich and everybody else is poor. It's so much more than that, because there are a ton of white people who have absolutely nothing. Literally absolutely nothing. There are a ton of white people who are worse off than other minority groups when it comes to their socioeconomic status. But white supremacy is a hierarchy system that is composed of more than just economics. That's just one piece of the many elements that builds up white supremacy. And so how white supremacy also works is because it is a large system that is backed by law and structures and systems and people who are in positions of power and wealth and ideologies and a bunch of different practices. It's a really hard thing to tackle. So somebody like Jemele Hill, who attacked white supremacy just by saying that Donald Trump is a white supremacist, what she did was saying, you know, she did it in a way where she's saying he's a white supremacist, or he's not attacking the idea of white supremacy, so that makes him a white supremacist. And so people are so mad about that there was this huge wave of backlash that comes, and people are trying to end her. And pretty much, you know, her speech, which is protected by the First Amendment, society does not want to let the First Amendment protect that speech that she just had because they're that offended. That's how white supremacy works. As a black woman who is using the same Bill of Rights that protects everybody else in this country, she's not receiving those same, you know, the same residuals coming from that First Amendment. All of a sudden, she's immune to the First Amendment. They need to get her out of here. That's white supremacy. White supremacy works as, when you attack white supremacy, you end up looking crazy, because this system is so huge and it's supported by so many people who blindly support it. Because there's people who endorse the idea of white supremacy and don't even know it, who unconsciously do it, who benefit from it, and may not even have a racist bone in their body, but they still benefit from it. But because a black woman who does not benefit from white supremacy but is on the receiving end of white supremacy, has called out white supremacy for what it is and called out some of the people in power who are endorsing it, all of a sudden she's public enemy number one. That's how white supremacy works. White supremacy will make an example out of somebody who tries to stand up. That's exactly what used to happen on the slave plantations, okay? Okay, one of the slaves wanted to, oh, the slaves, y'all thought y'all were going to rise up today? Okay. They go and find the biggest slave, the tallest one, the most muscular, the buff one. What do? They castrate him in front of the whole plantation to make an example out of him so nobody else will speak out. And white supremacy works this way as well, where a lot of times when black people do speak out about white supremacy, you can find black people who are going to go toe-to-toe with them and fight against them and defend white supremacy because they don't want to be made an example out of either. There's a lot of black people who are afraid to lose their careers and everything like that because they don't want to attack white supremacy. So just by everybody overreacting and trying to call for the end of her and the White House coming and coming down on her and everything like that, that's an example of white supremacy existing. All right? And when you're talking about Donald Trump, all right, she said he was a bigot. She said that she believes he's a white supremacist. When you look at his track record, you can't sit here and tell me that this man is not somewhat to an extent a white supremacist or a bigot, because his track record shows that. His track record with black people shows that. His track record with the Latino community shows that. His track record with the Arab community shows that. His track record with any community that is not white shows that, which pretty much shows why when it came to the election, and I'm not trying to make this about politics, every minority group voted against him except for one demographic. That's how white supremacy works. Going to my next point, the idea of structural oppression and racism. A black woman is working for a corporation that is pretty much a white corporation. Yes, ESPN and the NFL and the NBA, you know, they have the sports leagues have black individuals, but the sports leagues are run by white people, and the network that reports on these sports leagues are run by white people. And so now you have this black woman who now she has went out of her way to address something, and she's now public enemy number one. They're trying to get her out of here. They want her fired. That's that structural oppression. By just speaking out, that structural racism, just speaking out, you can lose your job. And it's not about her saying something that's offensive, because honestly, she didn't really say much that was offensive. But when you look at what they're trying to do, by her attacking the idea of racism in this country, now they want her to be fired. That's structural racism. I mean, there's a structure in place that keeps people like us in our place. It keeps us from not saying too much. It keeps us from talking. You know what I mean? There's a lot of black people who really feel a certain way about a lot of things, but they are totally afraid to say anything because they know that that structural oppression and that structural system will end them if they go against it. And white supremacy and structural oppression and racism all go hand in hand together. They just flow all in the same little mix. And the last element that you add in, white privilege. And white privilege is a little bit more complicated because there's a bunch of elements about it. The first thing I want to say is, there's a lot of people who don't believe that white privilege is a thing. There's a lot of people who have never been on the receiving end of white supremacy from a negative standpoint or a negative context on a macro scale because they're the beneficiaries of it, even if they don't directly contribute to white supremacy, but they passively, you know, benefit from it. Okay, there's a lot of people who have never been on that end, so when somebody says something like white supremacy, they are so offended because they can't even fathom the idea of something like that existing, and automatically they start calling that person racist. You're race baiting. You're using the race card, you know, because people have all kind of terms for black people when we start calling out things as we see it. Y'all have a term to dismiss everything we do. By the way, it's racist to use terms like the race card. It's racist to use terms like race baiting because what you're doing is you're dismissing the initial offense and trying to basically take away any power from that offense and make it seem like the other person is actually causing the problem, when in reality they're attacking the problem. You just don't want to hear about the problem because that problem makes you uncomfortable. Alright, so the privilege kicks in where there are so many people who have never even heard of or can even grasp the idea of white supremacy or anything like that, that they get offended. The privilege of not having to worry about white supremacy affecting their lives from a negative standpoint, that's white privilege. And another example of that is, you look at somebody like Donald Trump and you look at his track record, and I'm not trying to cook y'all president because I know some of y'all really love him, but when you look at his track record, if the tables were to have turned, if Barack Obama would have done half the things that Donald Trump would have done, he would not have ever been in office. If Barack Obama would have went and said he grabs women by the pussy, he would have never been elected. If Barack Obama had 3 or 2 ex-wives, he would have never been elected. If Barack Obama only had a bachelor's degree and not that Harvard degree, he would have never been elected. If Barack Obama couldn't read a teleprompter, he would have never been elected. Like, it's a bunch of different things like that. And you know, when you just look at Donald Trump's track record, Donald Trump, I'm sorry, and this is bigger than just Republican, Democrat, because I'm not either. But Donald Trump is very mediocre as a politician or as a public figure or as a government official or as a president. He's very mediocre. He has yet to really get anything done. But because of white privilege, people are standing behind him and pushing him as if he has been the greatest savior to this country. People are pushing him like he is the greatest thing ever. There is nothing that he can do that's wrong. And at this point, Donald Trump, I personally don't think he will ever be impeached. If he does, it's going to be by a stroke of a miracle. I don't see him being impeached. If anything, he would resign, if anything. But I see him doing his full 4 years. And I also possibly see him being reelected. That's white privilege, all right? You have a president who half the country can't stand. You have a president who has offended half of the world leaders. You have a president who literally is unstable, and we don't even know if he's mentally there, but people are going to continue to give him that pass and continue to give him just give him a chance. You know, you just got to give him a chance. That's white privilege, because when you look at how things were going when Barack Obama got in office, and again, I'm not a Barack Obama disciple, so don't think that I think everything he did was perfect. But when he got in office, people were ready with tooth and nail and hammer, ready to end him, and all he had to do was just do one thing wrong, and he was going to be done. And so you look at that example, and that's white privilege. Donald Trump gets away with doing anything he wants, and there are no consequences. And I'm not trying to make this a anti-Trump video, but it's just proving my point. And so when you look at how everybody responded to Ms. Hill's statements, they have proven that white supremacy exists, racism and structural oppression exists, and white privilege exists. And if you want more examples of those three things, just look at the comment section of my video over the course of the next 5 days, because it's going to be very unique to look at. You're going to see all kind of wonderful statements that pretty much endorse all of those things. So I'm going to be called all kind of niggers and everything like that, and all kind of crazy things, but it pretty much endorses everything that I'm saying. There's going to be people who don't think racism exists, and racism only exists when you bring it up, and blah, 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 blah. I don't see color. It's going to be all kind of stuff. So just look at the comment section over the course of the next 5 days. Everything will be in there. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. I don't know if she's going to be working for ESPN much longer. They're probably either going to demote her, cut how much time she has on television, make her have to issue some kind of apology. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with her in that situation. But we'll see. Anyway, I'm out. Subscribe.